So welcome to today's show, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in. On today's show, we want to introduce you to Jason Goldberg, who is a mental performance and leadership coach for celebrities, change makers, and CEOs. He is also the host of the Jason Goldberg is Ruining Podcasting podcast. I love that title. Definitely want to know a bit more about that. He's also the author of the #1 international bestseller on self-leadership entitled Prison Break, and the creator of the Playful Prosperity and Competition-Proof Business Immersion programs. Now, Jason has been featured as an expert on media outlets including ABC, CBS, and Fox, as well as teaching on the Mind Valley and Soul Pancake platforms, and has founded multiple startups, including one in partnership with NASA and the Space Shuttle program. That's awesome. He is also focuses on blending his signature mix of simple and transformational wisdom, captivating storytelling, practical business mentorship, and belly-busting humor to make personal growth less personal growthy, as he likes to say, and to leave everyone he meets with at least 5% more joy than when he found them. So we are so looking forward to the conversation today. So welcome to the show, Jason. It is great to have you here.
I'm so happy to be here. And it's so obvious to me when I hear people read my bios, just how narcissistic bios are. They're so narcissistic. Look at me. Look at all that I've done. Me. But I guess that's the only way to convey
exactly. People need to know who you are.
Very narcissistic, though. It's just like people say that they'll ask me like, "Who are you?" I'm like, well, like, you got it when? Do you mean like right now? Do you mean 5 minutes ago? Do you mind 5 minutes from now? It's like, I don't know who I am. So to hear the bio read is always a funny thing. But thank you for having me. I super appreciate it.
Well, just for the bio alone, you have been a busy guy.
Yes.
You've been a busy guy. First of all, like before we really dive in, I want to know more about the title behind your podcast.
Yeah, Ruining Podcasting podcast.
Yeah. So my whole thing was like, I always want to be disruptive as much as possible. This started very early for me. My mom used to make jokes. I think they were jokes. Maybe they were for real. But she would get these letters home from school from my elementary school teachers saying, Jason's such a lovely kid. He's so smart. If he would just shut up for 5 minutes, he'd be the best student ever, right? And so I always kind of was the center of attention. I was always kind of disrupting and distracting, but in the name of entertainment, in the name of bringing joy to more people, which of course all the teachers hated because that's not what we're there for. So the theme behind the podcast was the same kind of thing. Like, can I disrupt what you typically would expect from a podcast, right? So there tends to be a thing where for certain people who are like on the podcast circuit, if you will, like they're like have a book coming out and they're on 19 different podcasts or whatever it is, you could essentially hit play on those podcasts at the same time, and it's basically the same conversation the entire way through. And that's nothing bad about the host of the podcast or anything else. They just have kind of like a format that works, and the guest wants to make sure their book is plugged and all that stuff. And it makes it more of a presentation than a conversation, right? And so the goal of the podcast was, how can we disrupt that? And so what I bring in is there's like desk bits and games and games that are specifically tailored for the guest, and things that are kind of like edgy and kind of fun and kind of silly. And so we bring all that stuff together to kind of disrupt the whole notion of, here's the person, here's their book, here's how you get it. And that's kind of the end of the conversation. So that's where the Ruining podcast came in.
Wow, I love that.
Yeah.
Definitely.
We need more games.
We do need more games.
Do more games. Games are great.
Games, absolutely.
We're
learning already.
Exactly.
We're learning already. I love this.
Already picked up some value. We only just started.
There you go.
So, Jason, I mean, I'm a bit wary about asking you this question now, because you already said your bio sounds so narcissistic. But if you was to describe yourself to our listeners, maybe in your own words, in a less kind of bio form, what would you say to our listeners that have maybe never met you before and are just curious to know a bit more about you?
Yeah, I mean, it's the one thing that I will stand behind is not being super narcissistic in the bio is my kind of one-line life plan, which is also my one-line business plan, is to leave everybody I meet with at least 5% more joy than I found them, right? And that happens to take the form right now of coaching or speaking or whatever I do in my business, but it also takes the form of how I interact with the cashier at the grocery store, and how I interact with the security agent at TSA at the airport, and how I interact with my neighbor who I just met his new dog yesterday, and like all these things that are just ways that I can try to activate joy in every interaction that I have. So for me, that's who I see myself as in the world, is a joy activator.
Wow.
I love that answer. One of the reasons why we wanted to invite you on today actually was because we saw in the interview you did with Vishen Lakiani over at Mind Valley on one of his mentorship. I don't know what he calls that area anymore, mentorship something or other. But it was a really cool interview, and I loved it because you were talking about things that similar approaches that we take with our clients from a mindset standpoint. But what I really loved was the way you were talking about joy and how actually that can influence people when they're in specifically stressful situations or stressful environments or in a stressful period of their life. And I absolutely love that. So have you always been this kind of joy-giving, loving dude that just shows up in the world, disrupting things and bringing the joy? Like, have you had your own stresses and experiences there? Would you be okay to share some of those?
Of course. Yeah, no, I love that you asked that question. This is something I've had to become more conscious of over the last, I've been in coaching now it's almost a decade that I've been in coaching and speaking. And I've realized it more and more I'd say probably the last 5 or 6 years, that people had a misconception that I was just always the happy joy guy. And I don't even mean they thought I was always the happy joy guy, meaning growing up, but they like even now in my daily life that I'm always the happy joy guy. And that couldn't be further from the truth. So growing up, yes, I was always like the class clown, the disruptor, the whatever, but so much of my desire to cultivate being humorous and my need to feel validated came from the same space, right? It all came from trauma. It all came from not feeling like I was enough. And of course, I didn't have language for this when I was a little kid, but looking back, you notice what was going on. And so I was born to a single Jewish mother, so she can hear everything we're saying all the way in Florida right now. And so it was always just me and her, only child. Dad left mom when she was pregnant, never met him, never saw a picture of him. Actually just located him last year. I used 23andMe, was able to actually finally locate my father. He had already passed away, but at least I was able to find who he was and things like that. But I never knew him my entire life. So when you're born, and of course, you're forming your attachment styles, and your brain is creating neural pathways, and you're learning about what gets you love and what gets you praise and approval and what doesn't. And so coming into the world, there's this underlying feel already of you weren't enough for one of the parents. That's why they left. Of course, we know as adults, once we do the work, that's not why they left. That's their own stuff. But as a kid, you don't know that. All you know is that other people have daddies and you don't, right? So that person said, I don't want you. You're not enough. I'm going to leave. And then the person I was left with, my mom, who I love to death, she's had a lot of struggles with anxiety and depression and things like that. And so I was kind of always there helping to manage her experience. And so it became very clear early on that there were 2 things that were going on in my life. Number 1, it was a fear of rejection and abandonment. And number 2, it was the belief that I had to manage other people's experience of life. Right. So now take that into school, or take that into life at all in general, when you're trying not to be abandoned and you feel like one of the ways you make sure you're not abandoned is to make sure everybody's happy all the time. Then you do whatever coping skills are needed to make sure people stay. And so for me, I developed humor. If I can make people laugh, they're going to want to be around me. If I can make people laugh, they're not going to want to abandon me. If I can make people laugh, I feel approved of and validated and all those things. So there was that. And then there was also empathy that I developed, because again, like I was the fat kid my entire life as well. So being kind of like the fat, nerdy kid growing up, girls didn't pay attention to me. But if I could sit there and listen to their problems when they were going through something with one of my, my hot, friends, then at least I could feel some connection and some intimacy. So the reason I say all this is to say that what now is a gift and is a major part of the work I do, and it's what allows me to be connected to humans personally and professionally, all that stuff that's a gift now started off as a shadow, right? And when not checked, I can go back to the shadow. It doesn't mean I don't still rely on humor to feel validated. If I'm feeling a need to feel love, that I'm not feeling that love, who can I make laugh? Whose experience can I improve? So even for myself, this whole notion of leaving everybody I meet with at least 5% more joy than I found them, I need to still be aware that I'm not going into old patterns of pleasing and trying to get love and approval. And instead I'm doing it because I actually want to be of service to the world, if any of that makes sense.
Oh, definitely makes sense.
Definitely.
100%.
The question is, was there a pivotal moment in your life, or like a really moment that you made that shift from kind of the life you were living to thinking, I want to be of service. I want to add more joy to people's lives. I want to help people. Was there like a pivotal moment, or was it a kind of a gradual awakening and kind of educational process for you?
Yeah, it's interesting because I think it's both. But so so I had the one moment that I really kind of revisit a lot because it feels so impactful in my life. And it's the first chapter of my book, Prison Break. And the name of the chapter is The Day the Universe Cut Me Off, right? And there's a reason that it's called that. So this was when this story takes place in 2009. I was in my late 20s. I was still in my corporate job. I was director of engineering and operations for a tech consulting firm. I had been at that firm for 7 years, been in IT and tech for the better part of 15 years, doing really well, making well over 6 figures, had the perfect relationship, the car, the house, all the things that, we hear that are kind of cliches now with people who are successful. And at that same time, in my late 20s, is when I was the most stressed I had ever been in my life. I was working 70, 80 hours a week easily, the most depressed I had ever been, the most anxiety that I had ever had. And my physical weight had completely gotten out of control. I mentioned I was the fat kid growing up. By the time I was 15, I was 250 pounds. By the time I was in my late 20s, when this story happened, I had gotten up to 332 pounds, over 150 kilos. And I felt like a slow death. And at the same time, sometimes it felt like I wasn't dying fast enough. And what I mean by that is I would have suicidal ideation. And I remember driving to work, and I would drive across a bridge to go to work. And there were so many days where I literally contemplated just throwing my wheel to the right and just going off. And it wasn't that I wanted to die. It was just that it felt so hard and so heavy to be alive. And so there was this one moment in my late 20s, 330 pounds, super anxious, super stressed, super depressed, doing well by all accounts, to the outside world. And I was at work. I was in my office one day, and I tried to make a purchase on Amazon, and the purchase didn't go through. And it was my bank card, so I knew I had money in the bank. It was like a $60 charge. It wasn't like this massive purchase or anything. And my anger got the best of me. I had massive anger issues back then as well. I was the kid that would punch holes in walls as a teenager. And, if somebody cut me off in traffic, I would yell and scream and like chase after them and all this crazy stuff. And I had no control over any of my emotions. And so I got super angry, and I storm out into the lobby of my office building where I worked. And I call my bank, and I'm mashing the 0 button, just so angry, trying to get a live person on the phone. And I finally get a live person on the phone. This guy, Steven, he was so sweet, so lovely. And I'm just this tyrant who's like yelling at this poor defenseless man who's just trying to help me. And I demand to know why my card is not working. And he says, well, sir, it looks like there was some potentially fraudulent activity on the card. So we deactivated the card to protect your assets. To which most people would say, thank you for looking out for me. I appreciate you safeguarding me. What do we do now? Like, no, I was a tyrant, so I just got even more mad. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Did somebody hack my identity? Did somebody, break into my account? Like, what's going on here? And I demanded to know what the charges were. And so he punches a few more keys in the keyboard, and then he reads back to me, there had been 4 fast food transactions in one day in my city where I lived in Orlando. And their system flagged that as potentially fraudulent, because I guess sometimes people will make small purchases when they steal a card to make sure it's still active before they make a bigger purchase. And of course, it wasn't fraudulent. I had eaten at 4 fast food restaurants in one day, because the way that I coped with my sadness, my depression, my anxiety, my suicidal ideation was to eat. Right? If I'm bored, I eat. If I'm happy, I eat. If I'm sad, I eat. If I know I'm going to have a busy day, I eat. Like, whatever it is, it was food. And it took that multi-billion-dollar bank to literally say, we are taking away access to your money until you make better decisions. And it wasn't, and going back to your question, now, the reason I say it was both, it was an instant in time, and it's also a gradual thing, is because that definitely wasn't the first time that I had a wake-up call that something was off about my body and my weight and my health and all that. I knew that. There was no part of me that thought I was some, Mr. Olympia Adonis trapped in a 332-pound person's body. I knew something was wrong, but for some reason in that particular situation, it was the time where it stuck, right? It was the time where all my typical excuses of like, oh, but it's because of this person, or blaming this person, or blaming that situation, I couldn't find someone to blame for that particular thing. And so it forced me to look at myself and say, what are you doing? It wasn't a liberating thing. It wasn't a loving thing. There was no like, oh man, this is all me. Okay, great. What a wonderful opportunity to reframe the situation and grow into my highest consciousness. None of that shit happened at all. It was, you're such an idiot. I can't believe you've done this to yourself. How could you let yourself get this bad? It started off with shame, but then slowly I moved into this place of saying, listen, there are people that I know, both personally and people that I've seen in the media or whatever, who have been through objectively worse things than I have. And this is not to compare traumas. You can drown in 8 feet of water or 8 inches of water. But even still, objectively, it looked like people had been through stuff that was worse than my stuff. And they didn't seem to have the same approach to life. They didn't seem to feel the same way about life that I did. And so it became a thing where I said, listen, let me take the skill that I've used in technology for 15 years, which is reverse engineering. Newsflash, when you call tech support, 90% of the time they're Googling what your problem is. They don't actually know the answer. So if I could reverse engineer that, maybe I could reverse engineer consciousness and spirituality and happiness and joy. And so that's what started the trek for me. I guess it's 13 years ago now.
Wow.
Thank you so much for sharing all that. There's so many pieces of that story that I know we can definitely both relate to, and I have no doubt our listeners can too. And it's so powerful to hear you speak up about it, because for a lot of people, sometimes they're listening to like these podcasts quietly, and I know I was when I was kind of on this search for the opposite of suicidal ideation, depression, and I was very, very much resonate with your kind of part of that story, wanting to turn the wheel. For me, it was a slightly different picture with a rope, and it was horrible, right? Absolutely horrible. But one of the things I want to touch on is, I've heard you say before that burnout is not the route to success, right? And I think common sense kind of tells us that, but the way you've described your story as well, and for our stories as well, it was a variation on burnout in our own ways. And I would love for you to share then, okay, well, what is? If burnout isn't it, and everything we've just described isn't it, what is?
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's like the burnout thing is it's so easy to do. And there's a chapter in my book called Intentional Drowning. Not to be confused with unintentional drowning, right? Unintentional drowning, we know people intend not to drown, and yet they still drown. Intentional drowning, which there's no statistics on, so I couldn't find anything, because if you intentionally drown, you wouldn't be around to then be interviewed for the study. And it's very hard to intentionally drown yourself, by the way. But we do this with our career, and when I really look back at it, I shouldn't say we. I did this with my career, where I would put myself in these situations to try to prove to myself that I was needed, right? The burnout for me was, again, another mechanism, another coping mechanism to feel enough, right? And this one goes a few layers deep, and people listening to this may say, no, that's not why I do it. But think about this. Think about the need to be indispensable at work. Think about the need to get credit for your work, not as a narcissist, but because you want to make sure that you are seen, right? That they know you're remarkable, that they know you have value. And it's not the doing the work to show what you're capable of that's the problem. It's the tying your enoughness to the showing of the work that you're doing at a level of excellence to prove your value. Like it's the motivation that it comes from, right? So that's the first thing to look at. And there's a lot of different things for burnout here, but that's one of the things for burnout. The other thing for burnout too to look at, though, is that sometimes burnout is actually just boredom, right? That sometimes we will say we're burned out, and I've definitely been there before. I said a couple of years ago that I was burned out, and I realized that I was super bored with one element of the business that I was running. And so I got rid of it. That was it. Like it was a major moneymaker in the business, but I felt so bored with it that I knew that I wouldn't be performing at a level of excellence for the people that were coming into it. And so I needed to let it go. So for me, the kind of part of the cure for burnout here is, number one, to do the inner work to make sure that you're sourcing your enoughness from yourself, that you're, and this is not, I'm not trying to get anybody to some like Buddhist level status where they don't even listen to approval or validation. And they no, I don't need those things. I'm spiritually evolved to a point where your words bounce off of me entirely. Like, it's not about that either. Welcome in the validation, welcome in the approval, welcome in the kudos, welcome in all that stuff. Just don't rely on it, right? Have it be an accessory to life as opposed to being life itself. And so the first thing there is sourcing that for yourself, being open to receiving it, but sourcing it for yourself. And the second thing is to make sure that what you're doing feels in alignment. And that can feel like a struggle for people who are in jobs right now where they feel so out of alignment, right? It's like not even close. It's not like I can just change positions in this company and then I'll be more in alignment. For some of you, it is, right? For some of you, and I have clients all the time that do this, they think they want to leave their job. They really just want to do a different role inside the same company. They like the company, they like the management, they like their coworkers. They just don't feel alignment with the actual job. So if you have that, great. If you don't have that, we have to find alignment somewhere in our lives, right? If it's not available in this moment in the job that we're in, we have to find it somewhere outside of work, right? Whether it's an initiative inside of work or it's something we're doing outside of work. So anyways, all those things to say, I really believe the source of our success is knowing ourselves so that we can source what we need from ourselves and doing work that's in full alignment. If you listen to Howard Thurman, one of my favorite quotes of all time, he says, "Don't ask what the world needs. Ask what makes you come alive and go do that." Because what the world needs is more people who have come alive. So really just keeping that in mind. What is it that makes me come alive, and how can I integrate more of that into my daily life?
That's so true what you say. We, like I said, we both went through that whole stage of burnout for many years, working for someone else. Our values weren't aligned. We didn't really even know who we were at that point. And when we did start to do that work, and we start to find out who we actually are and start to become more aligned with our values and what we actually wanted in life, things that kind of weight started to lift. Like you said, that burnout or that boredom, which was what we thought burnout, it was burnout, started to lift, and we just started to think, okay, this feels better. So now I'm doing things that are more aligned. Life is starting to flow a bit easy. It feels more effortless, and it feels right. And I think you can't put your finger on it. You can't explain it, but you feel it. And I think it's so powerful. So what I would love to ask you is, like you said there, for people who are in maybe a job that they know they're not aligned with, but they can't leave yet, but they have to find it from outside initially. Like, what would you say to someone to help them to start finding that alignment from outside? So if they can't get it from where they are now and they can't leave at this moment, like, how can they start to find that alignment outside of that job?
Yeah, I like to go back to two things here, two different places you can look to kind of get the core essence of what brings you joy or what may be in alignment for you. It may not always spell it out directly, but it'll give you a clue. It'll point you in the general direction. And the two things to look at are, number one, what did you get love and praise and approval for when you were a kid? And number two is, what did you get in trouble for as a kid? Right? Those two things will point to your core essence. So for example, if you're somebody who always got in trouble because you were taking apart all of your family's gadgets because you wanted to know how they worked, that means you have a really inquisitive, curious mind. And I would look at my daily life and say, how often am I exercising my inquisitiveness, my creativity, my curiosity? How much am I doing that? And if I scan my day, if I'm feeling really kind of either burnt out or kind of just, apathetic about life, scanning my day will probably show me that I'm not doing any of that. Right. And so where can I do more of that? Whether it's like sitting down with your kids and literally taking something apart together, you could totally do that. Or, or just something you love in your house and you've always wondered how it works, or you want to go buy some plans for something off the internet and build something crazy, or you want to go to IKEA and get the most complicated piece of furniture they sell and try to see if you can put it together in 20 minutes or less. Like whatever that looks like for you, find that. So for me, again, like I mentioned, my praise and love and approval came from kind of empathy and humor, and my getting in trouble was kind of, talking too much and being the center of attention. And so I need to make sure for me that there's elements in my day where I am performing, I am making an impact, I'm serving in some way, and hopefully making people laugh. So I always go back to, my life has to have an equal mix of helping people create ahas and ha-has, right? It has to be both, right? They have to get the insights and they have to laugh. So looking at that stuff for yourself and just saying, like, what is kind of my core essence? What's the thing that people from my family always talk about that I did as a kid all the time? There are clues in there that can help you find what that thing is.
Oh, I can't wait to sit with my journal and answer those two questions. Like in this context as well. Yeah, I would love to then just put that as a layer then over our business and see. Get ready, listeners. There might be some changes in the wellness theory.
Nice. I'm looking forward to it. Here it goes.
So Jason, like, again, super insightful, super practical as well. I know that our listeners will love that. There's something I heard you say as well in your interview with Isham, which was about when people are stressed, one of the things that you encourage them to do is to ask them, how can they get ridiculously relaxed right now and loosen their grip by like 5%? And I really loved your take on that. So could you just explain what that's about and why this 5% of loosening your grip is so powerful?
Yeah, you'll notice the 5% thing is pervasive for me, right? I say 5% on everything because that's, to me, that's doable, right? If somebody says like, how do I get 100% more relaxed, or how do I bring 100% more joy to everybody that I meet? And it's like, wow, now what was a game has become pressure filled, right? And so a big part of this is not having things be so significant. And so I just came back. I was just at a Mind Valley event in Estonia last month, or I guess now it's the month before last, because we're in September now. But I was doing a talk there, and the talk was about how to go from waiting to creating, right? How to lose the weight, W-A-I-T. And one of the things I brought up on the screen at one point was the Nike logo, right? Everybody knows the Nike logo and the Nike slogan. The slogan is,
just do it.
Just do it. Exactly. And so I bring that up on the screen, and I ask this audience of, 500 or 600 coaches and consultants and healers and all these people, when you look at this slogan, just do it, what's the word that your eye immediately goes to? And it was pretty unanimous. It was the word do, right? Like, just do it, like do the thing, right? That's what it's all about. Get motivated, get creating. And the challenge with that is that when we focus on the word do, we're missing a bigger part of the equation. Because when we're waiting and not doing the things that we say we want to do, I don't believe it's a strategic issue. I believe it's a significance issue. And what I mean by that is we're putting too much significance on the thing that we want to do, and then it holds us back from actually taking any kind of action on it. And so in the talk, I was having people shift from the word do to the word just, right? Because you just brush your teeth, and you just take out the trash, and you just tell your partner you love them. Like you don't have to meditate for an hour first. You don't have to have rosary beads and mantras and affirmations. Like you just do it, right? You just do the thing. But it's different than saying just do it. Like do the thing. It's like just do it. It's not the biggest deal in the world. So the whole loosening your grip idea, which I actually really originally heard that phrase, loosen your grip, from Sadhguru, and it just stuck with me because there's such an interesting part of, especially if you are a control freak of any kind or have historically been a control freak of any kind. For those of you not seeing this on video, I'm pointing at myself.
Same as me. Complete and utter.
I love how the discipline, or sorry, the vulnerability being pushed over to somebody else. It's not me. So if you have any issues with control, I got you, bro. I'm with you. If you've had any challenge with control, then when somebody tells you to let go of something, that's like the antithesis of what I do. I grab tighter onto things. What do you mean? And so there was something about hearing him say the phrase, loosen your grip, that allowed me to feel like there was still some level of influence or control that I have over the situation. It's BS. I don't have any control over anything. But at the same time, it gave me this sense. So for example, if I have my phone in my hand and someone says, let it go, I'm like, oh God, if I let it go, it could fall, it could crash and smash into 1,000 pieces. And then I got to get a new phone and all the stories start happening. But if I say loosen my grip, then I'm like, all right, I can still see the phone. It's sitting in my hand. I can look at it from different angles. I can move it around. If I want to switch hands, I can switch hands. So there's some feeling of like engagement, involvement, but I don't have the same level of attachment, right? And so it's really important to notice that I have this belief that anything that we make the center of our universe, we are going to use all of our energy to protect it from failing or from falling apart. Right? So if your business is the number one thing in your universe, if your relationship's the number one thing in your universe, if the health is the number one thing in your universe, if your kids are the number one thing in your universe, and I know I say this and some people are like, you're crazy, but hear me out. If any of those things are the center of your universe, all of your energy is going to go to protecting those things from failing or falling apart. And so then what should we make the center of our universe? Well, in my opinion, and what works for me is I only want to make one thing the center of my universe, and it's my own experience of peace and ease. It's my own experience of peace and ease. If I can't have peace and ease be the center of my universe, then nothing else has a chance. And so I said that I was on this leadership council for women, like 40 or 50 leadership leaders in different spaces, different industries. And I was talking about this, and one of the women raised her hand, and I asked her to share a question, and she said, okay, so I make my own peace and ease the center of my universe. My kids don't get fed. My work doesn't get done. My employees don't get paid. My business falls apart. And I said, I mean, maybe that's one option of what could happen when you make your own peace and ease the center of your universe. But I know for me that if I have, kids who are counting on me to feed them, and work that people are waiting on me to accomplish, and employees who need to be paid, me not taking care of that stuff does not contribute to my sense of peace and ease. So if I'm focusing on my own sense of peace and ease, then I take actions that are in accordance with somebody whose identity is that of somebody who focuses on their own peace and ease, which means making sure the things that I have committed to, the things that I've given my word to, I'm following through on. That makes me feel more easy and more peaceful. So that's the kind of notion around loosening your grip, not taking things so seriously, shifting into the just, and just being in this place of being much more loose and not so tight gripped around the things that we're doing in life.
I love that. It's just exactly what you said there. It's just like when you are in that peace and ease, like, and when that woman who asked that question about if I'm in peace and ease and then everything else falling apart, but that kind of goes against being in peace and ease, because when you are in peace and ease and you're in that flow, it's very rare you're not going to take action. It's like you're in a resourceful state. There's no reason you're not going to sit back and go, whatever, let it do whatever it does. You're going to take action because you're in such a resourceful state where you're going to make better decisions. You're going to be able to cover those bases easily, but without the stress, without the overwhelm, without the burnout, and you're going to be able to have that positive effect and keep everything balanced and running. And I think that's what people miss. Is I think when they're focusing on, or if I focus on myself, what about everything around me is going to crash and burn? But no, actually, you focus on yourself, you find out everything starts to come into balance, and it starts to work more effortlessly. So you don't feel like you're spinning thousands of plates and dropping basically half of them at the same time. So and I think that's it. It's just changing that perception of, instead of thinking worst case scenario, think of, okay, well, what's the best case if I work on myself? If I reach that state of peace and ease, what are the amazing effects that it's going to have on everything around me?
Yeah,
and that is so key. I think is change that perception, change that mindset, and I think that's where the power comes in into that as well.
One of the things I love, Jason, there as well is that the
100% nailed.
The thing in the center is a state, right? It's not a thing, right? You've chosen a state of peace and ease. So I guess anybody listening, you need to figure out what is that state that feels right for you, that you want to anchor into. And we speak about this a lot because a lot of people are looking for the strategy, right? And often it's about, who are you being when you use whatever strategy you pick? Because it's the being that is showing up in that moment, and that's going to be the very thing that makes sure this strategy works in the first place. And so I really love that you mentioned that kind of that identity piece. Did you pick like the state of peace and ease on purpose because it's a state over a thing, or?
Yeah, I mean, for me, and you nailed it. Everybody needs to find what that state is for them. For me, it tends to be peace and ease, because I just know that for me, when my mind is calm and clear, I just see more opportunity. I see more, I see solutions to problems that I otherwise wouldn't have seen, or I see creative opportunities for things that I wouldn't have either, have thought of. And so peace and ease was a powerful one for me. But yeah, having it be a state is so important, because like you said, who you're being is so important. If you look at, if you've ever seen the Willy Wonka movie, the original with Gene Hackman, Gene Wilder.
Gene Wilder.
Gene Wilder, yeah, not the Johnny Depp one, the real one. But there's such an interesting metaphor in there for kind of how this looks and how consciousness and identity works. Is, if you remember, if you've seen the movie, and if you haven't, sorry for the spoiler. It's been out for 50 years. You should have already seen it. But at the end of the movie, they go into Charlie. It's Willy Wonka, Charlie, and Grandpa, and they're in the Wonkavator. And the Wonkavator is like the special elevator that can go sideways and back and forth and up and down and diagonal and all the things, right? Because it's the freaking chocolate factory. They can do magic. And so at some point, the Wonkavator like goes through the top of the chocolate factory, blasts through the glass, and now it's hovering over the city. Which, first of all, let's just get rid of the fact that there's a hovering elevator over the city. Doesn't matter. How does it land? But let's forget logistics. So you're hovering over the city. And then at one point, Charlie and Grandpa Joe look down at the town, and you hear Charlie saying, Grandpa, look, there's our house and there's my school, and it's all so beautiful. And it's just like, they're just taking in how gorgeous all this is. And it occurred to me, not the first time I saw it when I was a kid, but much later on when I saw it, it occurred to me that this is the same town and the same house that in the very beginning of the movie, they were like welfare stricken. They were in poverty. There was 4 grown-ups sleeping in a bed. They were living in squalor, and it was like this terrible thing. But now all of a sudden, from this different vantage point, everything's beautiful, and they can take in all this beauty they didn't see when they were on the ground level. And that's the entire point of being, is that if I'm at this low level of consciousness, all I'm going to see are the things that are right around me. I don't have the vision to see other things. It's like if I told you to lay face down on a sidewalk and your nose is against the cement, and I say, what do you see? You go, cement. And I said, well, what else do you see? You're like, I think an ant and then more cement. And I'm like, okay, so that's the extent of what we have. But now if I take you and put you on top of a building that's overlooking that sidewalk and I say, what do you see? Then you go, oh, I see other buildings and trees and cars and the sky. And you see all these things. So just noticing that when we raise our consciousness, when we really challenge the identity that we're living from, when we challenge the projection to life that we're living in, right? Because if I project onto life, oh my God, this is scary. I need to find a way to find a new job to make more money or else, then I'm responding to that projection and I'm meeting it with the same energy of scarcity. And so the only ideas I'm going to come up with are ones that align with scarcity, right? So even if they're ones that say, well, you just got to get a job, you got to apply at 1,000 different places. It's not the application of 1,000 different places that's the problem. It's the energy of scarcity that comes along with that. And so when I go do that, I'm implanting that energy into the work that I'm doing, and it's going to be less effective. So I want to get to that higher level of consciousness to say, okay, let's look at reality. Let's look at the projection that I'm responding to. Let's look at the projection that I'm creating. Let's look at who I think I am versus who I actually am. And we can talk more about that if you want to, but let me do all that stuff and then make the decision of what the actual action looks like. And that's where the being stuff comes in way more than the doing stuff.
Absolutely. Well, let's definitely tap into that, who you are based on who you think you are, because I think that is such an important topic, because it's something we discuss a lot with clients and people about who you are versus who you think you are, because a lot of us think, oh, I know who I am. Who are you?
Right.
What do you mean? So again, this is dialing down, and it's actually funny, who is your true self, not who you're pretending to be or the mask you're putting on to appease people or what's going on around you. So yeah, the takeaway, like this, let's go into this one.
Yeah, so this is a big one. I mean, identity shifting stuff, you know, I'm typically helping clients do one of three things. Typically it's all three, or it's at least a couple of the three, but it's how to navigate their thinking. It's which will help you have more joy and less stress and less suffering and more peace. There is shifting your identity so you can see more possibilities. You're at a higher level of consciousness. You understand who you actually are. And then it's actually taking more consistent action. So you actually feel like you're making progress, and you're taking all these inner world stuff you're doing and actually creating something in the world of form, if creating something in the world of form is something that you want to do. So the identity piece, though, is so huge. It really underpins so much of this, because if you think for a minute, imagine that you are the director of the movie Batman. Right? Have you seen some of the Batmans at some point? I'm guessing
all of them.
All of them. Okay, yeah. So I'm a purist. So I stick with the original. I like Michael Keaton. He's my guy. He's like the original Batman. So imagine that you are the director of Batman, Michael Keaton, and you're on set and you're filming a scene, and he's doing all his Batman stuff, and I don't know what this is that I'm doing, but he's kneading bread, kneading dough, I don't know, massaging somebody or judo chopping them, I don't know. But you film a scene and then you yell cut, scene was great. You start talking to the rest of the crew, you're getting ready for the next scene. And you happen to glance over and you notice Batman is pacing back and forth on the set, just looking really stressed out. And he's your star, so you want to make sure he's okay, right? So you walk up to him and you go, hey man, what's going on? You look stressed out. And he goes, oh man, I don't know. Like, what if I'm not powerful enough to beat the Joker? Like, what if my technology is not strong enough to take the Joker down, and the people of Gotham die, and then that blood is on my hands? And how am I supposed to live knowing the people of Gotham died because of me? What am I supposed to do if that were to happen? And you're looking at him like, what the hell is he talking about? Like, it's a movie, right? He's got to get that this is a movie. So you want to take care of your star. You want to be supportive. And so as the director, you have a couple different options. Number one, you can say, okay, Batman, let's make sure that we get your tech strong enough so the people of Gotham don't die. That's one option. And the second option is to help him remember that he's Michael Keaton playing the role of Batman in a movie. And to really slow down that conversation and say, okay, you know what? I'm willing to help you with all of Batman's stuff that you're saying, but just real quick, I'm curious, before you came to film this scene, where were you? And he would say, I was in a trailer getting hair and makeup done. It's like, okay, and what were you doing before that? I was in another trailer and I was putting on this suit. Okay, cool. And before that, I was in my car driving to the set. Okay, cool. And what about before that? Oh, I was home. I was hanging out with my wife and my kids. Oh, wait, hold on a second. I'm Michael Keaton. Like, there we go. So once Michael Keaton remembers that he's actually Michael Keaton, it doesn't mean that Batman's problems disappear, but it gives us some distance. It gives us some depersonalization, some non-identification to say, okay, Now that I realize that's a role that I do play, I 100% step on scene and I put on the outfit and I get the makeup and I know the lines and I act like Batman. But when I yell cut on that, or when cut is yelled on the scene, I go back to being Michael Keaton, and Michael Keaton has an entire different life than this role of Batman. So when I can get to a place where I understand that Batman's problems are only life-threatening, they're only ego-threatening, they're not actually life-threatening, right? They're ego-threatening, then I can relate to Batman's problems in a totally different way. When I think they're my problems, when I think they are who I am, is this body, my thoughts, my emotions, when I think that's who I am, then everything is a threat to my life, which means everything has to be responded to with this hypervigilance and this control to make sure I don't die, right? Because in my head, that's what it feels like, potential death. But when I have this separation, when I can actually sit there, and I do this probably almost once a day, just depending how my day is going. But if I feel myself getting into that space, then I will call it out. I will say, today I am playing the role of Jason, the frustrated entrepreneur who is upset that this project is not launching as quickly as I wanted to, right? And I notice that and I go, I play that role like an Academy Award winning actor. Like, that is my role. I nail it. It's who I am. Like, nobody can take that away from me. And I ask myself, cool, so given that that's a role that I play and I'm really good at it, I know exactly how to step into it, I can play it in my sleep. Given that that's a role that I'm playing, how does it feel right here, right now, like just being where my feet are, being in this present moment? How does it feel right here, right now, without an attachment to that role? Not getting rid of it, not reframing it, not pretending it's not there, but how does it feel right here without an attachment to that role? How does it feel seeing the wardrobe that role dresses in hung up on a rack in front of me? I'm not wearing it right now. That's waiting for me whenever I want to step back into it. But in this moment, how do I feel? Do I feel 5% more peaceful, 5% more joyful, 5% more relaxed? Do I feel more stressed? Do I feel more anxious? Like, really just checking and seeing how it feels. And for me, 99.9% of the time when I do that exercise, I feel at least a little more peaceful. And then the question becomes, which version of you is best suited to help Batman with his problems? The one who thinks that you're Batman and that you're at risk just as much as he is? Or the one that has this separation and is a little more peaceful and says, okay, let's roll up our sleeves and get to work. And so that's why I actually have this bracelet made that I wear that says not Batman. It's literally very hard to see. It says not Batman. And that's my reminder to myself. Anytime I get caught up in the movie and forget that I'm actually not Batman, this is my reminder to say, oh, you are the awareness that's playing the role of Jason Goldberg, the frustrated entrepreneur whose project isn't launching fast enough. And that understanding, that depersonalization, that non-identification is the first major step to feeling more joyful and more peaceful, no matter what's going on around you.
There's so much wisdom in there. And I also have to ask this, which is kind of a bit off topic, but I know you're a celebrity mental performance coach. Did you actually coach Batman?
I didn't coach Batman, but I have coached one of the female leads in Batman.
There you go.
One of the Batman, and that was part of where this came from.
I do love that though. Like, it's so powerful to be able to get that distance, but I particularly love obviously the way you've described it. Like, it's something I think we can all relate to in many ways, and I feel like we need not a Batman thing. I need not a Spider-Man. I like Spider-Man.
There you go. Yeah, perfect. You can pick whichever one you want. And you know what's funny? I have one other thing that I want to say about just comic book characters. Do you know who the most evolved comic book character is of the entire like Marvel universe? There's one character that nobody's ever been able to guess it. At least, of course, you'd have to be in my head to guess it, but nobody's been able to guess my version. So who do you think it is? One Marvel character.
Oh, well, I don't know if it's Marvel because I'm not that apt, but I would say Wonder Woman, but that is just probably biased.
Okay, Wonder Woman. Okay.
Doctor Strange.
Doctor Strange. Okay, can tell me both. I'd love to know why from both of you, why you think those are the most evolved of the Marvel characters.
Because Wonder Woman's always like operating from a place of love, right? Like, that's really behind the warriorship.
I love that. So true. I love that. Yeah.
And Doctor Strange obviously came from that background of obviously being very, very selfish and self-absorbed to open up, finding literally a dimension universe filled of possibilities, and just nothing really exists. Everything is basically self-created. So he's gone from that kind of very small little bubble world of comfort zone of it's all about me, to like I see screw everyone else, to wow, this universe expanding kind of multi-dimension world where things exist depends how you perceive them.
Yeah, I think I'm going to change my answer to Doctor Strange. I think that's actually better.
I was gonna say, I think you thought this through.
Yeah, that's it.
Well,
That's why I
pretty
love
good
the
one.
movies. It's just the movies just really make you think. It's crazy.
That's great. I love that. That's a really, really good explanation and much deeper than mine. Okay, so I'll give you the second best one since Doctor Strange wins now. So to me, the most evolved, most kind of conscious of the Marvel characters is actually Deadpool. Now, most people would not think Deadpool because he's gratuitously violent and makes terrible, horrible jokes, and he's raunchy as hell. But he's the only one that knows he's in a comic book. He's
so true.
Fourth wall. He breaks the fourth wall and talks to us.
Yeah.
So he knows it's complete bullshit. And even though he knows it's a story and that he's inside of a comic book, he doesn't then say, oh, well, nothing matters. I'll just sit on the couch and wait to die. He says it's all fake. And if I'm going to be here and play the game, I may as well play full out. Right. So he knows it to your point, too. He knows it's created. It's not real. And he still engages with it. And I think there's just something so beautiful there about recognizing we're in a movie. We're in this, we're in this self-created, I don't even know if it's fully self-created, but self-created reality. And even though we can know that we're in a self-created reality, we can still show up and engage with life. Right. And so I think it's such a powerful thing to recognize is that it doesn't mean if you start noticing that everything that is around you is not real, it's just a perception. It doesn't mean you become a nihilist where nothing matters and the world sucks. And so why do we do anything? It's actually instead an invitation to say, cool, since it's all made up anyways, let's really have fun with this entire fabricated world. So that's why I love Deadpool, but Doctor Strange, very good. Wonder Woman also, that's a very good one as well.
Yeah, but Deadpool, that does,
that
does make sense. I love the Deadpool. 100%.
Yeah. You've got me thinking about the other movie that Ryan Reynolds has done, Free Guy. Have you seen that?
I have seen. So Ryan Reynolds, I hate because you shouldn't be allowed to be that handsome, funny, and good at acting.
Yes,
like pick 2 of 3, bro.
Yeah,
I got nothing. You gotta help me out. But yeah, Free Guy was great. Free Guy was an awesome one.
I love that whole. Yeah, I love that whole concept of. That is the society we live in. I remember we watched that and we just go, oh my god, this is the quote unquote real world. This could be what's happening right now.
For our listeners, I think just go check out Free Guy as well, and ask yourself the same question about which superhero for sure.
Totally.
Jason, I'd love to ask you one more thing that I heard you say, which is when people come to you with a problem or they tell you that they're stressed or overwhelmed, your go-to comment, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but your go-to comment tends to be is you say that as if it's a bad thing.
Right.
Yeah. And I love this so much. Can you explain?
Yeah. Totally. Yeah. So it's one of these things, it's kind of a short circuit for the brain, right? Because it's not a question that we typically spend much time on because we just go into reactivity. And it goes back to the whole significance thing I was talking about earlier, because there's never been a time where I've been hungry or thirsty where I beat myself up for feeling those things. Like, how dare I be thirsty? What's wrong with me? Why can't I just be like everybody else who never gets thirsty? I'm such an idiot. I can't believe my mom traumatized me in this way that now I have to be thirsty. Like, none of that stuff happens. I'm just thirsty. And so being thirsty is a call for me to get hydrated. Being hungry is a call for me to eat something. Being tired is a call for me to go to sleep. Me not making enough money in my business is a call to me to go be of more service, to be of more creative, intentional service to people. So if instead of just defaulting to something that doesn't align with my preferences being a bad thing, because that's all that it really is, right? If it were not for our preferences, none of us would have any stress or suffering of any kind. It's because we have preferences. Yeah. We know better than everybody what it's supposed to look like, how life's supposed to be, what my life's supposed to look like, especially that if it doesn't align with my preferences, it must be bad. So this question of like, you say that like it's a bad thing is meant to just shift our minds to say, okay, if this wasn't a bad thing, if I wasn't taking this personal, right? If I knew that this bad thing happening had nothing to do with me, how might I interpret it differently? And that's the opportunity for us to say, what could this be calling me to step into? What's trying to emerge from within me that this is a trigger to a catalyzer, right? A catalyst to make that actually come out of me. So it's just kind of one of those things. There's another one of these questions that also is very short-circuiting. I asked it to a client the other day, and like most people, they short circuit and hear the question wrong the first time. Is I asked this person, what would be the worst part of you getting what you want? And typically people's response is, you mean what's the best part of getting the thing that I want? And they're like, oh, you mean what's the worst thing about me not getting what I want? I said, no. What's the worst thing about you getting what you want? And it's like, holy shit. And like most people cannot answer that like initially. They're like, I don't understand the question. It doesn't make any sense. But it's such a powerful thing to look at, because so much of what we hold ourselves back on is because there is some competing commitment, as Robert Keegan calls it. There's a competing commitment. There are two commitments that are competing with each other, and whichever one is stronger is the one that's going to win. So for example, I had a client of mine years ago who was just crushing it. And her business-wise, she was crushing it. She was like maybe 18 months into her business. She'd already hit $500,000 in revenue and just really doing incredibly well. But her health was struggling. She was probably 35 pounds overweight, and no matter what she was doing, she couldn't get herself to the gym. She couldn't get herself to eat right. She was self-sabotaging. She wasn't disciplined enough. She wasn't committed enough. All these diagnoses that she never went to medical school to be able to give to herself, but she still was giving them to herself either way. And she had all these diagnoses. And so I asked her, I said, what would be the worst part of you actually having a consistent gym practice, right? Where you went to the gym all the time. And again, same thing. You mean, what's the best part of me going to the gym regularly? I'm like, no. She goes, what's the worst part about me not going to the gym? No. What's the worst part about you going to the gym? And we sat there for a while, some part just in silence, letting her think, and some part in conversation. And what came out is that she believed that if she developed a consistent gym practice, that it would take time away from her business. And so her business would suffer. So now the worst thing about her getting healthy is that her business suffers. And if she has these competing commitments, I want to grow my business, but I also want to be healthy, but the commitment to grow the business is stronger, and this looks like it's a threat to growing the business, then you don't do it. That's natural. That's not a commitment or a discipline thing. That's a smart thing. This thing's going to sabotage that thing. I'm not going to do it. And so that's where the reframe starts to come in, where you have to start looking at and saying, how does this thing that I think is in conflict with this other commitment actually support this other commitment? And so we started diving down that road instead. Then we could say, how does you going to the gym actually allow you to grow your business even faster? And that's where she started realizing, well, if I felt more comfortable in my clothes, I would take advantage of all these speaking gigs that have been sent to me that I don't want to do because I feel uncomfortable. And if I felt comfortable on stage, then I'd be much more dialed into my message. If I felt more comfortable how I looked on video, then I wouldn't be thinking about like readjusting myself, and I could be super present. And all these things started coming out to show her that this is actually in support of, not in conflict with, the thing she wanted. So these are just these kind of, mind circuit blowing kinds of questions that we need to ask ourselves to really find out what's holding us back from moving forward.
Wow. I love that so much. I was that client. I was that client, and it was that shifting of I actually perform so much better when I've actually taken all of that time to do the self-care and everything else, and it hasn't impacted the business at all in a negative way. And it's just these things that we can be so unaware of. So I love those questions. Oh, so good. So good.
So Jason, before we wrap things up, because I do want to be conscious of your time, and you've already been so grateful with your time with us today. So is there anything else that you feel our audience really needs to hear from you? Maybe any last words of wisdom?
Yeah, I mean, my whole thing is I just want people to feel lighter. I really believe that when you lighten up, you level up. Right. And that you don't have to be serious to be successful. That's one of the biggest myths that I'm trying to make a dent in here, is you don't have to be serious to be successful. And so a lot of people will hear that and say, oh, then I'm going to be reckless, and I'm going to be aimless, and I'm going to, not pay attention to anything. And I'm going to half-ass everything. And this is where I want to offer a slight distinction here. And this is not even my distinction. It's from Alan Watts, but it's just one that I love so much and I always go back to, is he talks about the opposite of serious being sincere, right? I want to be sincere about the work that I put into my business. I want to be sincere about the work that I put into my relationship. I want to be sincere about the work that I put into my health and my wellness. But I don't want to take it too seriously, because if I take things too seriously, then I get back to having a tight grip. If I take things too seriously, then my creative energy gets leaked. If I take things too seriously, then I make them the center of my world, and then my peace and ease just gets thrown out the window in the name of being practical and making sure that I'm being responsible, or whatever these things are. So for anybody listening here who thinks that you maybe have a kind of a serious experience of life right now, and you want to have a less serious experience, or what I call a not so serious experience of life, the first thing to shift, the first thing to look at that's kind of an easy shift and doesn't require like massive overhaul on your entire mindset, is just ask yourself, in the moments where things feel serious, ask yourself what it would feel like to instead have them feel sincere. How would your energy feel if you stopped looking at this thing as like an all or nothing binary, I have to get this right or everything falls apart, and instead saying, I really care about this. And to show how much I care about this thing, I'm going to pour my love and my devotion and my time and my attention into it, but I'm not going to take it too seriously. Shift that from serious to sincere, and you'll notice more joy occurring in your system for sure.
Beautiful.
You can just feel the lightness in that as well, just kind of picturing those examples. Yeah. Beautiful. Beautiful. Jason, thank you so much for the ahas and the ha-has today. Honestly, love chatting to you today, and definitely feel like I want to bring you back on the podcast again already. This one's not even over. But Jason, is there anything, is there anywhere that you are more active in terms of social media where our listeners can come and find you and follow your work? Obviously your podcast as well.
Yeah, primarily I'm on Instagram, so you can kind of find that's the good portal for everything. So I am the Jason Goldberg on Instagram. Jason Goldberg was taken, so I had to get the most pretentious name I could. Jason Goldberg, bow to my feet, minions. So I am the Jason Goldberg on there. Promise very little narcissism on the page for the most part. But yeah, I post stuff there. That's where you can follow all my stuff, and that's where we can continue the conversation.
Beautiful.
Awesome. We'll put all those links in the show notes, so it's easy for people to click through and find out, connect with you, really. So I just want to thank you again for obviously taking the time to be on the show with us. It's been such a great conversation. We've enjoyed it immensely. It's been so much fun.
Thanks so much for having us, guys. I really appreciate you having me on, and you guys rock. Keep it up.